You would think that after calling down fire from heaven, you'd feel invincible. You would think standing alone before a nation and proving your God real would fill you with joy. But Elijah doesn't dance after the miracle. He doesn't celebrate. He doesn't feel strong. He runs. Not toward the next victory, but away. Away from the noise, the pressure, the weight of everyone watching. Away from expectation. He runs until he collapses under a tree and whispers words that no one expects from a prophet. I've had enough. Let me die. This is the part of the Bible that gets quiet. Because it's not about fire. It's about the ashes afterward. Hey, welcome to Psyche of Faith, where we don't just tell you what happened in the Bible. We explore how it felt. This is where theology meets psychology, and where faith meets emotion. Because the Bible is full of people who were just like us. They had breakdowns. They had anxiety. They doubted, they panicked, they ran. But God didn't disqualify them. He met them in those very moments. If you've ever felt like giving up after doing everything right, if your soul has ever been tired after carrying so much, then Elijah's story is your story too. Let's dive into it together. Elijah wasn't just a prophet. He was a storm in human form. He challenged kings. He interrupted droughts. He stood alone when no one else would. And God backed him with fire. Imagine what it feels like to be the only one standing for truth in a world falling apart. To have the weight of an entire nation's repentance resting on your shoulders. To watch God respond, yet still feel nothing inside but emptiness. That's what happened after Mount Carmel. The fire fell. The people bowed. But inside Elijah something broke. The man who faced down hundreds couldn't face the morning. And that's where his real story begins. Sometimes the strongest are the most fragile. The most anointed are also the most exhausted. Elijah was the public hero. But no one saw the private toll. Carrying the hopes of a nation will crush even the most faithful heart. We think victory is the end of struggle. But often it's where the inner war begins. Because the adrenaline fades. The applause dies down. And what's left? Your own thoughts. Your unmet needs. The spiritual weight you never let yourself feel until now. Elijah didn't break because he was weak. He broke because he was human. Jezebel wasn't just a queen. She was the final straw. One threat, after all Elijah had survived, sent him spiraling. Not because she was scarier than fire or famine, but because he had nothing left to fight with. Burnout magnifies fear. It doesn't take a sword to destroy you. Just one more drop on a full heart. Elijah had faced down armies. But now he was empty. And in that emptiness the lies got louder. You failed. You're alone. You're done. That's how depression works. Not through explosions, but through quiet collapse. Under the broom tree, Elijah prayed the most honest prayer of his life. Take me, God. I've had enough. No fancy words. No dramatic gestures. Just exhaustion, despair, and raw honesty. And what did God do? He didn't shame him. He didn't rebuke him. He sent an angel. With food. With water. With rest. God answered Elijah's breakdown with a nap and a meal. That's the kind of God we serve. One who sees our limits and loves us anyway. God didn't rush Elijah. He let him sleep. Sleep again. Before any visions. Before any new mission. Healing took time. And God honored that timeline. This is where many of us struggle. We want instant relief. But healing is slow. And sacred. It unfolds in silence. In rest. In being allowed to simply be. Elijah walked 40 days to Mount Horeb. Through desert. Through doubt. Each step a prayer without words. He wasn't chasing answers. He was surviving. Just putting one foot in front of the other. That's often what healing looks like. Not breakthroughs but small, steady motion. Sometimes the journey to the cave is part of the therapy. Because it's not about speed. It's about surrender. Letting the questions stay open. Letting yourself feel. And trusting that the cave has something waiting. In the cave, God asks, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Not because he didn't know. But because Elijah needed to hear himself speak. Needed to name the ache. The loneliness. The disillusionment. I've done all I could, and it wasn't enough. That's what Elijah says between the lines. Have you ever said that too? You gave everything. And it didn't fix what you thought it would. That's the honesty God invites. Not polished prayers. But the cries beneath the surface. God hears them. Elijah waited for God to show up with fire again, because that's how God came before. But this time the fire wasn't him. Neither was the earthquake nor the roaring wind. God wasn't in the loud, violent signs. He came in a whisper. Soft, almost silent, like the breath of a friend sitting beside you. It was a lesson Elijah didn't expect. That God doesn't always come the same way twice. Sometimes he speaks not in power, but in presence. In the quiet moments when your heart is still enough to hear. He comes to comfort, not to command. To sit with your sorrow, not to fix it in a flash. Elijah didn't need more miracles. He needed intimacy. A God who saw the cracks and stepped inside gently. That whisper was everything he didn't know he was missing. God didn't tell Elijah, "You're done." He said, "You still have more to do." But he didn't rush him into action. First came presence, then came purpose. God reminded Elijah that his story wasn't over. But he didn't ignore the pain either. He gave him a new assignment, yes, but also a new perspective. That his value wasn't in performance. That he wasn't truly alone. That others were still faithful too. Depression tells you it's all on you. But God gently reminded Elijah, "You're part of a bigger story. You don't have to carry it all alone." We live in a culture that worships hustle. That says rest is weakness. That slowing down is failure. But Elijah's healing started when he stopped. When he let his body collapse. When he let himself feel. When he admitted he couldn't keep going. And God met him there, not with anger, but with compassion. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop running. Lay down. And trust that you're still loved in that space. That your worth isn't tied to constant motion. There's a difference between being broken and being tired. Elijah thought he was done. God knew he just needed rest. Maybe that's where you are too. Not failing. Just exhausted. Not abandoned. Just burned out. God isn't surprised by your fatigue. He doesn't love a future, fixed version of you more than the weary one right now. You don't need to prove your faith through constant strength. Sometimes real faith is admitting your limits. Letting God love you there. Without shame. Without conditions. Just presence in your pain. Faith isn't always loud declarations and bold stands. Sometimes it's a whisper in the cave. A breath that says, "I'm still here." Even when everything inside wants to disappear. Faith can be quiet, tired, fragile. But that doesn't make it less real. In fact, some of the most sacred faith lives in those moments. When you're clinging to hope by a thread. And yet, you're still holding on. Elijah's faith didn't leave him. He just needed room to breathe again. God gave him that room. And he'll give it to you too. Elijah said, "I'm the only one left." But he wasn't. There were thousands still faithful. He just couldn't see them through the fog of his pain. Depression isolates. It makes you believe no one understands, no one cares, no one is like you. But it lies. You're not alone. There are others who feel like you. Others who have fallen apart and found their way back. You're not the only one under the broom tree. Or hiding in a cave. And just like God met Elijah, he meets them too. And he meets you right here, right now. Mountaintops are glorious, but caves are where transformation happens. Elijah needed the pause. The space to fall apart. To reset. To listen. We all need that pause. It doesn't mean we've failed. It means we're human. Even Jesus withdrew to lonely places to pray. Silence is not absence. Stillness is not stagnation. Pausing is preparation. And sometimes, the deepest spiritual work happens. When we stop performing and start healing. When we let the cave speak. Elijah didn't die under that tree. He didn't end in the cave. But went on to finish his calling. Eventually he didn't even taste death. He was taken to heaven in a whirlwind. What began in desperation ended in glory. But that journey passed through depression. God didn't skip that chapter. He honored it. That gives us hope. That even our darkest nights have purpose. And that what feels like the end may just be the beginning of something sacred. You don't have to be fire to be faithful. You don't have to roar to be real. Sometimes your soul is a flickering flame. But it still matters. And God still sees it. He sees your effort when no one claps. He hears your whisper when no one's listening. He knows your heart when it feels like a cave. He won't rush you. He won't shame you. He'll feed you. Speak in your silence. And call you forward gently. When you're ready. If Elijah could feel that way, so can you. If God could love him through it, he can love you too. You're not too broken. Not too much. Not too far gone. This is a story of depression, yes. But also of restoration. And maybe, just maybe, you're not at the end. You're at the turning point. There's room for your pain in God's presence. And there's hope even in your cave. You don't have to climb out alone. Just start by being still. And letting him whisper your name. If this spoke to something deep inside you, know you're not alone. You're seen. You're safe. And you're held. This is why Psyche of Faith exists. To remind you that your faith has space for emotion. And your story is sacred. Feel free to subscribe for more stories like this. Share with someone who might need a quiet whisper today. And remember, Even the strongest fall down sometimes. But God meets us gently when we do. Take a breath. You're not done. You're just in the cave. And there's still light ahead.